Welcome back to the Real Story channel. Once upon a time, there was a small village surrounded by lush green hills and farms. Princess Adanne resided in this tiny village, and her father was King Chakmeka, the ruler of the village. Adanne, the oldest daughter of the king, was renowned for her kind and gentle nature, and she treated the villagers well. However, Adanne faced a lifelong struggle with a significant issue. She had a strong and unpleasant body odor. Even from a young age, Adanne's smell was worse than that of other children, and as she grew older, the odor became more pungent and unpleasant. Whenever she walked, the foul smell would linger behind her. As Princess Adanne matured into a young woman, the villagers started treating her differently. They would try to avoid her due to her offensive odor. Some villagers would make unkind jokes and comments about her stench behind her back. Mothers would quickly usher their children indoors when they saw Adanne approaching, and former friends would deliberately steer clear of her. This made Adanne profoundly sad. Despite her beauty and royal status, many young men from the village and neighboring kingdoms who wished to court Adanne would be repelled by her odor as soon as they approached within 6 feet of her. Consequently, they decided not to pursue her. Adanne felt extremely lonely and withdrew from leaving the palace most days. She would often stay in her bedroom, gazing out the window, daydreaming about finding true love and a man who could accept her despite her unpleasant smell. However, this seemed like an impossible dream, and Adanne shed many tears over her profound sense of loneliness. One scorching summer day in the village, while Princess Adanne was in her castle bedroom fanning herself, she heard lively sounds emanating from the village square. There was joyful drumming and laughter. Curious, Adanne opened her shutters and peered outside, witnessing people dancing and celebrating the summer feast day around a bonfire. Adanne felt a flicker of excitement and contemplated sneaking out of the palace to observe the festivities without being noticed. The people seemed so engrossed in their revelry that she thought she could go unnoticed. Quietly, she left the palace and cautiously made her way to the edge of the village square. For a brief moment, no one realized she had joined them. Adanne stood in the shadows, watching wistfully as girls her age twirled energetically in their vibrant skirts. However, a breeze blew, carrying Adanne's unfortunate odor through the crowd. People wrinkled their noses, searching for the source of the unpleasant smell. The drumming and dancing ceased abruptly as all eyes turned toward the isolated princess. Mouths dropped open in shock, before contorting into disapproving sneers. People doubled over, gagging, and whispered behind their hands while pointing at Adanne. The carefree joy that had filled the air just moments ago vanished instantaneously. Adanne's eyes welled up with tears of humiliation. Feeling utterly embarrassed and ashamed after being ridiculed while attempting to dance at a village gathering, she ran away from the crowd and sought refuge behind some bushes, desperately hoping to remain unnoticed. She crouched down, trembling, behind a tree, praying that no one would find her. However, in the distance, she heard the steady beat of a drum growing louder and approaching. Fearfully, she peered through the leaves to see who was coming toward her. To her surprise, it was a cheerful young man from a neighboring village, smiling as he played a hand drum. He walked directly toward her hiding spot. When he reached her, he ceased playing and kindly inquired why she had stopped dancing earlier, noting how joyful and free she appeared while dancing. Adanne was taken aback that this stranger had followed her all the way there, especially considering he could detect her distinct scent. In disbelief, she asked, You can smell me, and yet you still sought me out here. Everyone back in my village mocks me and laughs at my dancing. The young man responded gently, Don't worry about them. I think you're a wonderful dancer. Please ignore their unkind words and continue dancing with happiness and freedom. Adanne was surprised by his kind words and realized that he genuinely didn't care about her differences. Comforted by this revelation, she decided to disregard the cruel taunts of her neighbors and dance freely as she desired. The young man began playing a cheerful and upbeat rhythm on his hand drum. Initially unsure, Odon soon started swaying lightly in sync with the music. The stranger's smile grew wider as he watched her, and he increased the tempo of his drumming, playing faster while warmly fixed on Odon. She felt that he truly saw her, not just her outward appearance, but her heart and soul. For the first time, she felt completely accepted as she was. This realization liberated her spirit, and she let go of self-consciousness, dancing fluidly with grace and joy. The drumming accelerated, and Adanne's feet moved faster. She leaped and spun with ease, weaving swift and elaborate steps that came instinctively. The rhythm flowed through her, filling her with elation and vitality. With the stranger's admiring gaze locked with hers, she felt liberated to express her love for dance fully. When Princess Adanne finally ceased dancing, she and the smiling stranger held each other's gaze for a moment. Odon felt exhilarated from the joyful dancing and uplifted by the experience of being truly seen and accepted by someone. They burst into laughter together, connecting through their shared happiness. After catching their breath, the young man introduced himself as Aaron, a resident of a nearby village who played drums for events and celebrations in the squares. Aaron asked if Princess Adanne would meet him in the same spot tomorrow to talk more and maybe dance together again. His warm smile and enthusiasm made it evident that he had greatly enjoyed their time together. Princess Adanne eagerly agreed, feeling her heart fuller and lighter than it had been in years. Throughout the following weeks, Princess Adanne's rendezvous with Aaron became the highlight of her days. Each afternoon, she would excitedly sneak away to their secret spot in the bushes, where Aaron would already be waiting with his drums. The two newfound friends relished in long, lively conversations and continued to share the joy of dancing. They engaged in conversations where they shared stories and jokes, resulting in hours of laughter. During these talks, Aaron would frequently pick up his drumsticks and play energetic rhythms that delighted Princess Adanne and inspired her to dance with newfound freedom and joy. In Aaron's presence, she let go of all self-consciousness about her lingering odor issues. He made her feel so accepted that she could lose herself in the music, enhancing their connection even further. As Adanne twirled past Aaron, he looked at her with admiration for her spirit, beauty, and essence. Over the course of several weeks, the initial bond developed into a deep and trusting friendship, blossoming into warm affection felt by both parties. Princess Adanne found herself falling in love with Aaron, and she sensed his equal caring for her in return. However, a part of her secretly agonized over their differing social statuses, Aaron, a struggling commoner musician, and she, a sheltered royal obligated to marry for political alliances. She assumed a future together was impossible, yet in her most private dreams, she yearned for social status not to interfere, wishing they could be united in marriage. Despite their differing backgrounds, Princess Adanne and Aaron continued to build their connection, sitting closely, talking, and laughing together. One afternoon, as their conversation unfolded, Aaron reached over and gently took both of Adanne's hands in his expression shifting to seriousness and brimming with emotion. Aaron expressed his deep affection for her and his desire for them to be together forever. He proposed, disregarding royal customs and permissions, and expressed that being with Adanne brought him true happiness. He longed for a life bonded in love, hoping their union could bridge the gap between their villages. Overwhelmed with surprise and joy, Princess Adanne cried tears of happiness. She had wished for nothing more than to be Aaron's wife but assumed it could never come to fruition. Adanne felt she didn't deserve such a wonderful man who was willing to overcome societal barriers to declare his unconditional love for her. In her excitement, she embraced Aaron, whispering a heartfelt yes against his smiling lips, sealing their love with a long, tender kiss. She had never imagined such liberating love could be hers. With flushed faces and beaming smiles, they made enthusiastic plans, fueled by new possibilities. The lovers agreed to share the wonderful news with their families immediately. First, they would seek permission to marry from Adanne's parents, the king and queen, and then travel to Odor's village to gain his family's approval and blessing. Hand in hand, filled with ecstasy, they embarked on their new journey together towards a future as husband and wife. However, shortly after their engagement, tragedy struck the villagers, shattering Princess Adanne's newfound happiness. A deadly and rapidly spreading plague ravaged the countryside. The early symptoms included a high fever and the appearance of large, blister-like boils on the skin. Within days, those infected would succumb to violent fits of madness before ultimately succumbing to death. It was a horrific and agonizing way to die. In a desperate attempt to contain the terrifying outbreak, the leaders of the 4 neighboring villages made the difficult decision to completely close off their borders. No one was allowed to travel between the towns under any circumstances. If villagers attempted to flee, they would be captured, quarantined, or even killed by fearful guards. The plague continued to rage on, and week after week, residents lived in fear, isolating themselves in their homes and avoiding any interaction with potentially infected individuals. Friends and neighbors boarded up their doors and windows, only venturing out briefly for necessary supplies before retreating back into self-imposed isolation. For Princess Adanne, the weeks of separation from her beloved Odor turned into months of complete isolation within the palace. She felt trapped as the plague spread relentlessly around her. Her initial excitement about a future with Odor was overshadowed by daily fears for his safety, as she had no way to reach him. The villagers remained frozen in quarantine for endless months, waiting for the plague to run its course. Adanne and Odor could only hope and pray that the other was still alive. However, despite isolating herself within the royal palace, Adanne eventually fell ill. She woke up one day with a fever and the terrifying red boils spreading across her arms. The plague had reached her. Over the following days, her condition worsened, and she experienced severe fevers, leaving her weak and unable to even lift her head for a sip of water. The king and queen, witnessing their eldest daughter's suffering, tried every traditional remedy and modern medicine available, but nothing seemed to help. In a desperate attempt, the queen remembered an obscure tonic that an old woman from a village had once brewed when Adanne was a child. Despite its repulsive ingredients, they administered the concoction to Adanne, and miraculously, a day later, she showed signs of improvement. With round-the-clock care and the strange medicine, Adanne slowly recovered from the brink of death. Though still frail, she had survived the illness that had claimed many lives. Her parents were overjoyed and shed tears of gratitude as her fever finally broke. After several more days of rest and recovery, Adanne felt strong enough to stand up from her sickbed. As she looked at herself in the full-length mirror, she was shocked by her reflection. The prolonged fever had transformed her appearance. Her skin looked fresher and more supple than ever before, and to her astonishment, the chronic body odor that had plagued her since childhood was completely gone. Overwhelmed with happiness, Adanne laughed ecstatically and twirled around, reveling in her newfound confidence and the delightful scent of her own skin. Eager to share the glorious news with her parents, Adanne rushed to them, unable to contain her excitement. She wanted everyone to know that the infection that had nearly taken her life had instead brought about a remarkable transformation. After many more months, the plague began to subside, and the strict quarantines were lifted. As Princess Adanne walked through the castle gate for the first time in over a year, she held her breath nervously. However, to her surprise, no one recoiled or insulted her. Instead, villagers paused their activities and admired her graceful presence. Adanne couldn't believe her eyes and ears as praises were called out for her, replacing the previous disdain she had experienced. Note: I've made some modifications to the text to improve clarity and readability while retaining the essence of the original story. Bearing a glowing health, some even cautiously stepped nearer, their wide eyes drinking in her beauty, looking entranced in her presence. The local young men, in particular, couldn't seem to stop boldly watching the princess's every move, their mouths hanging half open with affection. For the first time she could recall, Adanne moved through her kingdom feeling strong, confident, and truly accepted. It seemed that over the course of the plague's horrors, her cured odor and newfound confidence had transformed her into a village belle that no one could ignore. Princess Adanne was dizzy with the thrill of acceptance and admiration from the villagers she used to hide from. Caught up in self-pride over her cured odor and newfound beauty, she had nearly forgotten her loyal love, Orin. But walking through town, she spotted a familiar figure bounding eagerly down the road towards her. It was Orin, her dear friend, companion, and bridegroom-to-be, whom she hadn't seen in over a year since the plague hit. Adanne's first eager impulse was to run straight into his arms with teary relief for his safety, but she caught herself short, doubt surfacing. Surely now she was too high above someone of common status like Orin. She was a pampered royal, and he a drummer boy without notable wealth or a family name to elevate him. Thoughts swirling into insecurity, the princess composed her face into a formal distant mask before Orin could reach her. When he did, the drummer boy was grinning fit to burst, desperate delight shining through as he cried, "My princess, how I have missed basking in your beauty and radiance." He moved toward her as if expecting a warm embrace, but Adanne stood reserved and still, making no move to welcome him back after their long separation. Orin joyfully stepped forward to hug Princess Adanne, so thankful to see his beloved betrothed again after agonizing months apart. But the princess recoiled sharply away from his opening arms, a look of deep surprise and hurt flashed across Orin's face at her rejection. Confused, he searched her now cold eyes questioningly. In sharp, cutting tones not like her warm voice of old, Adanne stated that she no longer wished to continue their relationship. She told him that after enduring the plague's terrors and emerging more beautiful than ever, she now moved in different, higher social realms than a common boy like Orin ever could. Orin looked deeply hurt by Adanne's harsh words, his anguish evident on his face. "But Adanne, I love you," he protested passionately. "These months of silence only made me love you more. I'd do anything to make you my wife." Princess Adanne met his gaze with a fiery glare. "You will address me as Princess Adanne," she commanded coldly. "This conversation ends here. I deserve someone better than you." She spat out the words, feeling a cruel satisfaction in them. Then, without a backward glance or a pause to listen to his heartbroken pleas, she swiftly turned away, marching off with determination. She blocked out her own anguish, shutting off the pain she felt inside. In Adanne's mind, she cut off their connection so abruptly, closing that chapter of her life for good. Now she had plenty of noble suitors vying for her attention. In the following months, the increasingly vain princess continued with court life, acting as though the humble drummer boy, Orin, had never touched her heart. She entertained extravagant marriage proposals from respected lords and princes, one after another. These influential men, who had once turned away from Adanne in disgust, now shamelessly showered her with flattery, eager for the attention of the newly transformed princess. Adanne grinned as she soaked up their compliments about her flawless skin, graceful movements, and regal demeanor. Praises that she could never have imagined receiving before. Despite the adoration, she couldn't shake the regret knowing at her heart for pushing Orin away so harshly. As weeks passed, King Chukua urged Princess Adanne to quickly choose a husband from the numerous suitors vying for her hand before rumors damaged her reputation. With her marriage prospects in mind and wanting all eyes on her, Adanne declared that she would host a wrestling tournament where the kingdom's strongest men would compete for the chance to marry her. Upon hearing this, men of great strength traveled from far and wide, eager for the opportunity to win the hand of the renowned beauty. In the days leading up to the tournament, Adanne became obsessed with enhancing her appearance to outshine everyone. Her maids tirelessly groomed her, but in her pursuit of outer perfection, Adanne neglected basic cleanliness, even foregoing regular baths. Slowly but surely, her old body odor returned. On the morning of the wrestling tournament, the weather was perfect, providing an ideal backdrop to showcase Princess Adanne's beauty. She entered the bustling arena adorned in shimmering silks and adorned with jewels, aiming to dazzle the crowd. But as Adanne lifted her delicate hand to wave at the cheering crowd, their excitement suddenly changed. A surprised whisper spread quickly among the people, and they moved away in disgust, wrinkling their noses at the strong smell coming from the princess. Embarrassed men hid their faces, looking away to avoid eye contact. Princess Adanne felt deeply embarrassed. When the tournament participants shook their heads and left, wanting to avoid her, the villagers watching the tournament also followed, talking quietly about her body odor and holding their noses in disgust. Adanne felt utterly crushed and ashamed. She quickly removed her fancy royal clothes and jewelry, dropping them in the dirt. With tears in her eyes, she turned and ran away as fast as she could. As Adanne ran, her eyes landed on one person standing alone across the tournament grounds, Prince Arinza. He stood tall and straight, looking at her with kindness as she hurried away. After a moment, Arinza walked purposefully towards her, his face showing both concern and sadness for her distress. When Arinza reached Adanne, he spoke gently to her, "My dear precious one, how could you think so little of our love and what we meant to each other? Why would you give up our bond for the fleeting attention of others?" Tears rolled down Adanne's cheeks as she shook her head. "Please forgive me, Arinza. I made a terrible mistake, thinking that looking beautiful on the outside was more important than our love. Thank you for watching. See you in the next videos."